Hey you guys, welcome to book review number 68, I believe. The Girl from Botany Bay by Carol Erickson. Okay, this is a historical book about Mary Bryant, who was a convict on the first fleet. Let me read this back, Will. Who was a convict on the first fleet to Australia in 1788, I believe. And what makes her story so amazing is that she actually was able to escape from the convict in Sydney, Australia, and take a small watercraft with 6 other men and her 2 children all the way up to East Timor, or I believe West Timor, in Indonesia, a travel of 35,000 miles. That's kind of the crux of the story. But what is also filled in throughout is how she got to Sydney, why she was convicted, and her celebrity status upon escape after she was caught in Indonesia and sent back. Her celebrity status in Great Britain once news of her escape actually came forth, and how she was eventually pardoned by, I believe it was King George the Fourth, maybe the king, the monarch of Great Britain. This from a girl that was raised in the lowliest of statuses in I forget the town, but in Cornwall, a very poor area of Britain. Was of the lower class, was a highway woman, basically a highway thief, was convicted of assaulting a woman, an elderly lady, and stealing 12 pounds worth of jewelry. So she was sent to jail and was initially going to be killed, hung, but she was actually not given pardon. But at this exact time period, the Sydney colonies were being set up, not even known to Mary Bryant until her later, not conviction, but sentence of deportation, of transport, was finalized. So she went to the Dunkirk, which is a decommissioned ship that was basically just a rotting hull, terrible, the worst of the worst. No privacy, no sanitation. People just took shits everywhere. A lot of very grotesque sexual acts were engaged in, fed rotting food that was barely edible. Many people died, the elderly, the young, or at least the young that weren't of healthy age yet. And that isn't even the transport from London to Sydney. That's just kind of the holding tank, if you will, while she was sent to Sydney. So then she got on the Charlotte, and I believe actually while in the Dunkirk, now while in the Charlotte, she became pregnant, but she gave birth to her child Charlotte on the transport ship, the Charlotte. She named her child after the transport ship she was on. That went to Tenerife, and then Brazil, and then finally on to Cape Town, and then on to Sydney Cove, of which, this is 1788, we're not talking a luxury cruise line. There was malaria, fever, starvation, thirst, scurvy, dengue fever, typhus, just all sorts of terrible diseases that affected these people. Mary was no different than the others, though she was actually, I think probably Charlotte would have died in her pregnancy if they hadn't stopped in Rio de Janeiro, because from the trip from London to Tenerife and then to Rio, Mary was in basically months 2 through 8 of her pregnancy. And by the time she got to Rio, she was in really bad shape. But in Rio, they actually had a fresh source of food, particularly the fruit, that really revived her spirits, really revived her health, and was able to give her enough strength to give birth to young Charlotte. So then they cross over to Cape Town, and I believe it's between Rio and Cape Town when she has the baby, about 1 month out from, I think it's about 1 month out. No, it's just a few days out. I think it was like 4 or 5 days out from Rio to Cape Town. She has Charlotte. In Cape Town, they kind of do the standard restock, and then from Cape Town to Sydney Harbor, there's the icebergs. It's super cold. These women have not been given correct blankets. They're shivering, they're cold. Water, because the waves are so big in the South Indian Ocean, are just pouring over the deck with freezing salt water, just terrible conditions. Then she gets to Sydney Cove. And here, it's not like they started a colony ahead of time and then sent some convicts in. They really did start from scratch, the first convict in. The first convict ship was really the first settlers of Australia. And so they had to rely on foodstuffs that they had in supply ships until they could get supplies in or start growing their own crops, get reinforcements, or wait another year to start the crops coming up. The other thing that's really mentionable about this, and which I think is an interesting contrast to the way that the pious Americana was started, was, and I've described this in The Commonwealth of Thieves, another book that I've done on the very early history of colonial Australia, is the convicts, both the men and the women, got off the boat and immediately engaged in an orgy which was almost uncontrollable by the mutiny. Now, it wasn't all just all together, but basically people got off the ships and started banging one another just randomly, and really the lust of the human spirit overtook these people. This is in contrast to the Pilgrims, who came in and were very nice and had their little muskets and were going to convert these Indians and create New Providence. It's I don't know. I mean, obviously you want people to have good morals, but I kind of like a society that's founded like that, because you're not just setting the bar too high, and you're not going to project those values on other people over the course of time, which I think has kind of happened with the Pilgrims in the United States. But that's another story. So anyway, there's deprivation, lack of food. Governor Phillips is not particularly cruel, but he's not particularly skilled either. He's more a captain rather than a settler. So he's not used to founding colonies. He's used to taking these ships all around. So after the second fleet comes in, and they're even more deprived than the first fleet, they've been locked in shackles, haven't been able to move at all. Just people collapsing and dying. Stomachs being opened up after death, and being found that there's literally just nothing in the stomach. So Mary Bryant, along with Will Bryant, and I should say, I think Mary was Mary Borland, and she met Will Bryant. This is after giving birth to her first child, who was a bastard. She didn't know the father. Will Bryant, they married in Sydney Cove, and actually Mary Bryant should be commended in that she married almost immediately once getting to Sydney. She probably did engage in some prostitution, some acts of orgy, but she didn't find much solace in that, and pretty immediately married after she got to Sydney. So these two people, Will, during his time there, was head fisherman, but as a little side thing, was a head fisherman, but got punished along with Mary Bryant for essentially pilfering some of the stocks of the fishing expeditions, which were key in the interim between when they could grow the crops and when they could get the supply ships to feed the colony. So they actually ate really well for a while until they got found out, and then, you know, I mean, they didn't get killed, but I think Will got lashes, and they were basically, you know, stripped of their role as, or Will was stripped of his role as head fisherman, so they no longer had that access to food. So anyway, a little peeved off, along with a few other people, including somebody on the second shift named Morton, I believe, that was his last name. That was a navigator. They set out in a small boat with just a little kind of sailing rig, but an open boat, maybe 20 feet long. And I believe there were 7 of them and then 2 children. And Emmanuel, Mary's second child, was also born in Sydney Cove to Will Bryant. He was not a bastard, unlike Charlotte. But anyway, they went up the coast, encountered huge waves kind of along the New South Wales coast, but once they got to the Great Barrier Reef, it was more smooth sailing because the reefs, if you know anything about the geography of Australia, they're very detrimental to deep hulled boats, but to like light or small boats, they're actually a godsend because they break the waves before they get to like 10 or 15 miles out from shore, before they can even get to shore, so that there's large areas of just like glassy calm, in which case you can raise the sails and just sail on through. We get up to the Torres Strait. Somehow there isn't really much recorded from when they got from the Torres Strait to East Timor, because I think they were really in a deprived state, particularly for food at that point. They had to leave the coastal lands because to get to Indonesia you have to leave the coast, and also there were some more hostile Aborigines up there. So they eventually get to East Timor, claim that they are part of a whaling ship that had capsized, and British one, and they had sailed in their whaling ship, so they're not convicts, they're claiming they're free persons, sailed to East Timor in search of rescue in their little small boat. And this works for about 6 weeks, maybe like almost 2 months, where they live a pretty luxurious life, you know, like they're really treated kind of not as celebrities at this point, but as harrowing overcomers of a tragedy, until of course Will spills the beans for some reason which is unknown, and their plan is found out. They are convicts from Sydney, in which case they're immediately locked up, and the plan is to send them back to Great Britain for hanging. So at this point, Pandora, it's Edwards. Captain Edwards, which was leading the ship Pandora, comes from dealing with kind of a historical coincidence. At this exact same time, the mutiny on the Bounty was going on, and so he was taking some of the prisoners that he had found, not all of them because they didn't find all of them, i.e. that's what Pitcairn Island was eventually founded on, was the mutiny on the Bounty people, the people that committed that mutiny. But the other ones, the ones that they did find, he took from Tahiti and was planning to go via Indonesia all the way back to Britain to have them hanged for their mutiny. What I find interesting about this is the term Pandora's box is actually from this ship. Now, that's a common term that most people hear. Oh, don't open Pandora's box, it could have this whole thing. The ship was named Pandora, and on the deck, now they did, I think actually maybe the convicts were put in these boxes. No. The Pandora had actually crashed in the Torres Strait. Now, not at the same time that Mary Bryant were there, but the thing that was interesting about the Pandora is that they had these boxes on the deck of the ship, so on the top part of the ship, where that were so confined, and literally they put the mutineers in these boxes and gave them very minimal food and water, wouldn't allow them to get out, wouldn't allow them to interact. So it's basically just like human confinement, a little bit sadist, really just kind of the worst of humanity. But anyway, that boat crashed, and they actually used their own safety boats to get to East Timor. And so the combined mutiny on the Bounty and Mary Bryant's crew, the 7 of them, took a ship to Batavia, which I believe was actually a small Dutch vessel. And then from Batavia was commandeered by a British ship that was taken to Cape Town, and then from Cape Town they went directly up to England. Now a few people died. 2 of the main members died between Indonesia, or one died in Indonesia, and then I think 2 more maybe died. No, 1 died in Indonesia, 1 died on the trip from Indonesia to Cape Town, and then another one actually escaped by jumping off the boat, but they're not sure if he survived or just drowned. The other 2 died of diseases. But unfortunately, and actually one of those was William Bryant. I think William Bryant was the one that died from Indonesia to Cape Town. Now unfortunately, Charlotte and Emmanuel have both died on the trip from Cape Town up to England, particularly relating to the African fever, which they both succumbed to very sadly. You know, it's really a tragic moment in the book when the kids die. But Mary Bryant's story had gotten famous by the time that they had arrived up in Britain. Her harrowing story, particularly her being a woman. And even though she was initially condemned to death, there was so much public outcry against it that she was eventually, as I mentioned earlier, given a pardon by the King of England with the help of, I believe it's like a Becket, I don't know. He's a lawyer from Scotland that took to Mary Bryant's story. And anyway, the last trip, so that's kind of a whole harrowing story in and of itself, the trial and then the pardon and being held in jail and all that stuff. It's all over the tabloids, all over the lips of everyone in Britain. The last we hear of Mary Bryant is her trip that she took from London back to her home in Cornwall. Cornwall. And then she's known that she got a small inheritance from her dad, but other than that, it's assumed that she just lived her life out somewhat normally, kind of the last part of her life somewhat normal after living this almost impossible. I mean, you got to consider that we're not talking modern air travel, we're not talking modern boat travel, we are talking 1780 boat travel, partly in small boats around Australia, through Indonesia. I mean, it's just so many directions. There's so many. It would have taken both a phenomenal psyche as well as a phenomenal, physique or body, if you will. Not that she was really buff, but just to endure to deal with all this. So. It was truly an amazing journey and a very well told journey. This book isn't super long. It's about 190 pages, I think. I read in about 3 days maybe. So, but anyway, I should mention the author, Carolee Erickson. I would recommend it, you guys. Let's do this one more time. The Girl from Botany Bay. A lot of rambling, but a very, very good historical piece. All right, see you guys. Bye.